So let's take a closer look at these different ways of calculating GDP. So let's start with the expenditure approach. And for this approach, we're just adding up all the, all the amount of money, all the expenditures we need to purchase all the final goods and services that are produced within some time period. So adding up all the needed expenditure, or all the expenditure needed to purchase, pen's dying a bit, I'm just gonna, let's try to finish it, to purchase all final goods and services produced in a given period. This should say period. So hopefully that comes out. I'm just going to put this pen to the side so you don't use it, since it might be a little bit hard to see maybe. So this is the expenditure approach, and we're going to think of kind of four broad categories. And these kind of relate to that, that circular flow of income and expenditures we talked about at the beginning. So we kind of talked about, on this side, there was kind of four broad categories we talked about. The first was that consumption flowing from households to domestic firms. So that's going to be one of our categories, is the consumption category. The second is investment. So remember, some money was flowing from households to the financial system, and then the financial system was investing it, and that was part of the expenditure that went to domestic producers. We had government purchases. So remember, the government was buying goods or services, and that was money that was injected into the circular flow and going to domestic producers. And finally, we had net exports. So remember, that was what net exports is going to be: exports minus imports. We'll talk about that in a second. So money was flowing from households to the rest of the world in terms of imports, but the rest of the world was purchasing some, let's say, Canadian products, if we're thinking about Canada here, and that was money flowing from the rest of the world to domestic producers. So these are the kind of four broad categories. Let's take a slightly closer look at these next, and then we can move on to the income approach. So let's take a somewhat closer look. So the first one is, we're going to call, first category, actual consumption expenditure. Which we're going to denote C with this should be a subscript lowercase a, if that's not clear. So this A is for the actual. So it's the actual amount we see. And we're going to, when we come up with our model, we're just going to use C, and that would be like the theoretical amount, where CA is the actual amount that we see. So that's always the actual consumption expenditure. So this just includes, it's going to seem really self-evident, but includes all expenditures on goods and services related to consumption this period, in a given period, So think about everything from, like, you get your hair cut, you go to the dentist, all these kind of things are all included in this consumption expenditure. So this is that you're currently going to use. So that consumption in that current period. But we also have expenditure that we're not going to use in this current period. And that's what we call investment. So actual investment. Pen's not going to work. Actual investment. And I'll just put EXP for expenditures. We're going to denote that I, capital I, subscript lowercase a. So this is for the actual, again, it's the actual amount that we see in our economy. And what this is going to be is expenditure on the production of goods, on the production of goods not for present consumption. So for future consumption, not for present consumption. So think about inventories. So inventories are an investment because you're going to sell them in the future. So they're part of it. Actual investment is going to be inventory, is going to be part of that. So for plants and equipment, that's an investment for future production. Plants and equipment. And the third category is going to be like residential housing. It's considered an investment. All right, so those are the first two categories. Then let's quickly erase this and talk about the last two, which are actual government purchases, as well as net exports. So last two categories, actual government purchases, which we're going to denote capital G, subscript A. So again, the A is for the actual. And this is just all the purchase that the government makes of goods and services. Purchases of currently produced goods and services by the government. And so we just make a note that excludes transfer payments, so we're not going to include money that goes to people. Sometimes the government takes money from one group and will transfer it to another. We don't want to count that, right? Because it's just money going from one to another. If we count that, we're going to count it like twice, right? Money's already been counted with something else. So we're going to exclude transfer payments, this transfer of money from one individual to another. That's not adding anything, is what I mean by that. So we're going to denote government purchases as GA, and the final is net exports or actual net exports. So NXA, so NX for net exports and A for actual. And so what this is going to be is actual exports minus actual imports. So that's what actual net exports is made up of. I'll even just say NXA equals this. So taken together, we have this equation for GDP. So actual GDP is going to be actual consumption expenditure plus actual investment expenditure plus actual government purchases plus actual net exports. So exports minus imports. We want to expand this. And so when we come up with our model, we're really going to be using this expenditure approach to think about the determination of our output in our economy, kind of trying to understand business cycles and things like that. We're really going to concentrate on this equation. We're going to start off really simple and kind of just have the first two bits of this, and then we're going to kind of add layers of complication to our model as we go forward.